Welcome back to another episode of Better Than I Found It, the podcast all things college golf. You're listening to Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor University. Today's guest on Better Than I Found It is former Arizona State golf coach Tim Mickelson. Tim is also known as Phil Mickelson's younger brother and Phil Mickelson's caddy from 2017 through March of 2024. But what a lot of you may not know about Tim is he was a really good, accomplished college golf coach. First as an assistant at San Diego State University, then taking the University of San Diego to heights they'd never seen, 3 national championships appearances in a row. And then finally, a really good stint as the golf coach at Arizona State from 2011 through 2016. Tim coached future world number 1 John Rahm while he was in college, and Tim also was his player manager his first couple of years on the tour. But Tim talks about his growth as a coach, as a young coach, comparing also coaching with caddying, and then obviously the time he spent on the bag with his older brother Phil. I think you really enjoy this podcast today. Combination caddy coach and a really good interview. Okay, Better Than I Found It listeners, join me in welcoming former San Diego head coach and Arizona State head coach Tim Mickelson to the podcast today. Tim, it's a real pleasure to have you on Better Than I Found It.
Coach, thanks for having me. And sometimes I refer to my colleagues by their first name, and other times it's always by coach. And you are a gentleman that I have always respected since the moment I met you. So you forever will be coach to me.
Well, I appreciate that. How about that? That was nice. And, that's what I'm going to talk about, too, today is your time when we first met way back when you were a very young coach. I still consider you like a really young guy. I do. How old are you now? In your 40s someplace.
I turned 47 last week.
Okay. Well, happy birthday. And
Thank you.
You've always kept yourself in shape. You've always looked younger than you were anyway, but I always considered you a young coach, even when you were the head coach at Arizona State. So I always felt that way. But, it's really been a while since our paths have crossed and a lot has happened. I'd just like to catch up. For one, I'd like to get our listeners to know a little bit more about your college coaching career that they may or may not know, because casual golf fans pretty much know you as the brother of World Golf Hall of Famer Phil Mickelson and his caddy up until this March. His caddy, as far as, I don't know, that was about a 7-year stint, right?
Yeah, basically exactly 7 years, yeah.
Yeah. So that's basically what they know. So I'd like to let them know a little bit more about your coaching career. And you were a good player as well. I know you played 3 years at Arizona State, and then you transferred to Oregon State. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
And then you were runner-up in the Pac-10 championship in 1999, your senior year.
I was, I only lost by 10 shots to Paul Casey.
Well, that was another Arizona State boy right there. So, yeah, wow. I didn't realize that. I knew Paul was a heck of a player. I didn't realize he'd won by 10, but that's all right. It says runner-up. It doesn't say 10 shots behind.
Correct.
But, you spent a few years, I know, probably playing a little bit of competitive golf, but your first stint as a coach was an assistant for Dale Walker at San Diego State. So tell me about that experience and what got you to the University of San Diego. How did that all come about?
Yeah, Coach. So what happened was I had played 1 full year on the NGA Hooters tour. I went to Q school. I got to second stage of Q school. Back then it was 3 stages. So I got to second stage. I played really poorly, and I was just burnt out of golf. And so I came back to San Diego, and I knew some of the guys on the San Diego State golf team, and I went and played golf with them and started talking to the head coach, Dale Walker, and just said, I'm really burnt out and this and that. So I'm going to take a few months off. And he goes, well, we're going to Hawaii soon. He goes, I can make you my volunteer assistant coach. We can get you on the trip. And if you want to coach a little bit, I'm like, well, that sounds like fun. So let's do that. So I did that for about 3 or 4 months, and I didn't get the itch to go out and play competitive golf again. So he made me his full-time assistant coach. And a year later, the head coaching job at University of San Diego came up, and I thought I was ready to be a head coach. Although not one person I talked to, not one, recommended that I actually take the job. They all thought it was a dead end job. The school had never gone to the postseason. I would have been the first full-time head coach. They only had 2.5 scholarships. Their budget was about $12,000 a year. But my attitude was, this is really my only chance to be a head coach without having to move. And as long as I do anything good, remotely good, I would have a chance to move up the ladder if I so decided to, wanted that to be my future. So I took the head coaching job, and then after 8 seasons, had the opportunity to go to Arizona State.
Well, let's talk about that success. Yes, San Diego had never made it to the national, never made it postseason whatsoever. And you took over in the fall of 2003. And by 2008, 2009, so that school year, you got them to nationals for the first time ever and finished 13th there. That was at Inverness. Following year, again, got to nationals at honors course in Chattanooga. And then one more year, your final year at San Diego State or University of San Diego, you guys made it to the national championship at Karsten Creek. So, it was not lost on anybody. We saw that you were WCC Coach of the Year 4 times. You guys just had some great finishes. And I would say this. I remember a player you had that nobody knew anything about it. I think he was from Hawaii because I'd seen him at the Junior World. Alex Ching, is that correct?
Yep.
And I remember seeing you at the Junior World, and I think he'd already committed. And I said, he's a pretty nice player. And you said, yeah, I think he's going to be a really good player. He led the NCAA championship after 36 holes in consecutive years. Is my memory correct?
That is correct, both as a freshman and a sophomore.
Wow. I mean, that was like really amazing. That was your first 2 years of getting to the national championship. And I think he finished about 15th in 2009, and he finished tied for second in 2010 at the honors course. So he obviously was a big reason you guys were able to get things going. But I mean, tell me about how you built up to that, how you led up to that, because you really were at a place that had never had any success whatsoever. What do you think? Why were you able to have that success at San Diego?
Ooh, that's a good question, Coach. I will say the fact that I was the first full-time coach gave me a leg up on the previous coaches, because obviously I'm spending more time recruiting, more time in the office, more time at practice. Golf was never a priority for the athletes or the school prior to me getting there. So obviously when you're at a golf school, or if you're playing Division I athletics, your goal is to try to become as good as you can be, hopefully go to the next level. But you only have that if you're able to really focus on your sport. And so Division I athletes, yes, you are a student athlete, but you have a big focus on your sport and being as good of in our case, golfer as possible. Prior to me getting to University of San Diego, golf was just sort of secondary. It was like, well, if I could get, $5,000 or $10,000 to play golf, great, I'll go play golf. But it just was never a priority. And so my focus obviously became one of, let's get the best students we can get, because it's a tough school to get into, but let's get guys that want to turn professional. And once we get them to school, let's give them everything we can do within the realm of what the NCAA will allow and what we can afford to get them to that goal. So whether, it was getting them better practice facilities, or, better facilities and courses to play on the weekend, or nowadays it might be getting a foresight, GC quad or a TrackMan, things like that. That had become sort of our goals. And so we ended up finding kids that we thought were pretty good, that we also felt were getting overlooked, and therefore had a little chip on their shoulder and wanted something to prove. And we sort of talked about being the little David, that, hey, it's a lot of fun to go out and beat Goliath. Goliath is expected to win every single week, and you only have to beat Goliath once or twice as the David to look as a hero. And so that was sort of what we tried to do. And even though we went to the national championship 3 years in a row, we definitely felt like we were that little David guy trying to compete with the Goliaths of the world. And you mentioned Alex Ching. Alex is actually still one of my best friends to this day. He's living back in San Diego. He's trying to play again. Actually lost in a playoff for the Reno tournament this week. But, he was our first real big recruiting win, I would say. He was being recruited by New Mexico and Pepperdine and a few other schools. And when he decided to come to our school, I felt like that was sort of our turning point. Even before he had stepped foot on campus, I'm like, we've now proven that we can win these recruiting battles against some of these bigger schools and bigger programs. And so it was sort of full bore ever since then.
Do you think, and this is just a question I've had because I've experienced it as a head coach, do you think that Alex may have thought, I could go there and change that program, I could transform that program, or if they believe in me, I think I could, whereas maybe those other programs have already achieved that type of success? And you think he had any of that in him?
100%. I think that's a huge recruiting tool if you're able to use that, which is, hey, you're going to come and you're going to be a pivotal member of our team to get to the next level. Because it's tough if you're a top 5 program in the country. It's tough to be like, well, you're going to come and change the program. Well, it's tough to change something that's already at the peak or such an elite program. But yeah, to be able to come in and I think we even talked to him about it, is, hey, you're going to be able to come in and potentially be the best player in the history of this program, leave your mark, and you're going to be sort of, a quasi god for the rest of your life. So yeah, we definitely use that on a few different players, and I think they've got some good players right now, and they're with this new coach, they're going to hopefully continue that trend.
Well, absolutely. And so obviously the success led to something even a little bit bigger, and that would be at Arizona State, which could be considered one of the top 5 iconic programs in the history of college golf. I think everybody could say that. You could argue that. And
yeah.
So tell me how that came about. It was after the 2010-11 season. So the fall of 2011, you got there. And I do want to talk about a magical season in 2014-15 where you guys won a bunch. Especially
God, we were good.
Yeah, you were really good. But how did you get the job? How did that come about?
I guess when they decided to make a change from Coach Line, who had, he had been the coach of the century for the Pac-10, ton of success at ASU. When they decided to make a change, I was fortunate in that we were coming off of 3 solid good years, and I'd had history at ASU both as a player. My brother obviously went there. I sort of knew some of the right people, so I was able to fairly easily get in there and at least explain what I wanted to do with the program and where I envisioned us getting, and certainly had the opportunity, and so was able to go there and had a very frustrating first year, and then after that we were able to sort of turn it around and get it figured out after that.
I remember walking on the 9th fairway with you at Southern Highlands, and you had this player you were really struggling with. He was kind of an entitled little kid. You'll remember who he was, but I remember the frustration in your voice. And I just told you that day, it's not always going to be like this because he's not one of your players. And I remember he actually did transfer out, and you started getting your players in there. And it was, I'm going to mention a couple that were pretty outstanding. One was Max Rotliff and one was John Rahm. Those 2 guys, by the time I'd gotten to Baylor and we played with you guys at Arizona State's tournament, I said to myself, wow, where did he get these 2 players?
Yeah, so I believe those were both my first recruiting class, actually, now that I think about it, because we had John, Max, Alberto Sanchez, and a kid named Trey Ka'ahanui. And Max had already been talking to Coach Line before I got the job. And so we sort of continued the dialogue, and obviously he came to ASU. And then with John was later in my first year as a coach, and I had some money, and I just kind of reached out to him, and he had either just graduated high school or was a month away, and just said, look, if you come next year, we can offer you X. And the next day I got an email back from his dad and him and saying, okay. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if you understand exactly what I'm saying here. I am giving you a scholarship, but you are committing yourself to come to Arizona State to play golf. You're not going to look at any other schools. And he goes, yeah, we understand. Let's do it. I was lucky because ASU had a long history of Spanish players. So John was very familiar with Arizona State on both the men's and women's side and what we could provide. His plan was to take a year off of after high school, take the gap year to learn English because his English was not very good. And so when he actually came into school, I've said this multiple times, like after 2 or 3 weeks, I remember telling my assistant coach, I'm like, he's just not going to make it. He can't speak English. Like, how is he going to get through school? And with the help of actually rap music, as well as his teammate Alberto Sanchez, who spoke fluent Spanish, um, he was able to learn the language really quick. And if you listen to him talk now, you would never guess that 10 years ago he couldn't speak English. I mean, he speaks very eloquently. He's probably got more words in his dictionary than I do. And so credit to him for sticking with it and actually, thriving, not just as a student. He's obviously done extremely well as a golfer.
I had always known who he was. I walked in his group a couple of times when I was coaching against him, if you will. But last year I had my team at Greyhawk for the national championship, so 2023. And he happened to be at Silverleaf where we were playing that day. And he came up and talked to my team for about 6 or 7 minutes. I think there was a member who said, "Hey, that's the Baylor golf team. Would you like to say something to him?" And sure enough, he came over and he was so gracious, and he talked to the guys about what it takes and what a great opportunity this is and how he enjoyed it. I was really, really impressed. I became a huge fan that day, just the way he treated my guys. So he's a world-class golfer, but he's a really great guy too.
Coach, I'm glad you mentioned that because he really is. He is extremely gracious with his time. Sometimes he gets a bad rap because he's so fiery on the golf course, but that's his passion. That's the Spanish passion coming out. John wants to be the best player he can possibly be. He wants to leave his mark on the game. He wants to be the best, player from Spain in the history of golf. And so when people see that passion, I see the passion now, but some people think that it's not the right way to get your anger out or whatever. But he is such an awesome guy off the golf course. When I worked with him at ASU, he was awesome. When I worked for him his first 2 years as a player, a professional, he was awesome as well. He really is one of the truly good guys out there.
I think a lot of people are misunderstood. I coached Pablo Martin, who's also from Spain.
Yeah.
And Pablo had a fiery, fiery temper. But if you scrape that away and get the rest of it, he was just a really good dude. And he cared about his teammates. He cared about being great. And I think that's misunderstood a lot of times. Now, you try to help a guy manage it so that you don't want to steal it from him, because that's part of the reason he's great. I mean, John Rahm will have passion and fire the rest of his career. We know that.
Yes. Yep.
But I'm glad you said that, because I agree with that. I really do respect him a lot from that. But let's go backwards just a little bit from the time you were his player manager and even his coach early on. But the 2014-2015 season was sort of magical. That spring, you guys won 5 times. I mean, you did a lot of things. You were the coach of the year in the Pac-10, and or was it Pac-12 at the time?
Pac-12 then, yeah.
Yeah. But talk about that spring season. You guys got on fire.
We got on fire. Both John Rahm and Max Rotliff at the end of that year were first-team All-Americans, and it seemed like that entire spring, if John didn't win, Max did, and if Max didn't win, John did. And so those two guys just fueled each other every single week, and they were so good. It was almost like they were men amongst boys. And then you have the 3, 4, and 5 guy when they played solid. You knew you were going to have those two guys finish in top 10 pretty much every tournament. And so those two guys really fueled that season. Yeah, we won 5 times, really felt like we had some good momentum going into nationals, and just as some teams do in those situations, just kind of laid an egg.
Yeah, it happens. I mean, some of the best teams that had great years during the regular season just didn't, and maybe it's because they want it too bad. I don't know. It's like, and a lot of times it's 5 guys, so you might have 2 or 3 guys go south at the same time, and your team score is in the tank. So things happen, but you can't deny those 2 players being first-team All-Americans brought you just an amazing season.
That is 100% correct. Those 2 guys, they were purely the reason why we were able to have that sort of magical season. And I don't think we ever got to number 1 that spring. I think the best we ever got was number 2. But we definitely had a great year and really enjoyed We enjoyed each other's company, and I'll tell you what, when you're winning, it's a lot of fun, isn't it, Coach?
Yeah, but none of us get to do it often enough, do we?
No, not in our sport.
No, we don't. But you spent 2 years after he graduated, 2 years as John's player manager, if you will. And I know you traveled the world as he was getting his career going, and he got pretty good really fast. I mean, it didn't take long. And I remember that putt he made from the back fringe in San Diego at the Farmers. Tell me about that. Were you on the 18th green at that time?
Yeah, so I was behind the green, and obviously was thrilled when I saw it go in, and I knew that was just going to be the beginning, for John. I mean, with his career, he's going to continue to do great things, but it's always nice to get that first one, under your belt, because once you get the first one, the rest will come. And a funny story about that: the week before, I had met with the guy who owned Bighorn, and I was trying to get the Bighorn logo on John's golf bag, and I told him, this guy's going to be really good. He's young. You want to get on his bag before he wins. And so we had actually agreed on a number, and he calls me the Monday of San Diego tournament and says, talk to some of my sort of guys in my inner circle, and I'm not comfortable paying that number for a guy that's so young who hasn't won yet. I said, RD, this guy's going to be really good. Fast forward 6 days later, John wins. That night, I get a call from RD, and he goes, so do we have a deal? I said, we do. But all of a sudden, those numbers have changed, RD. So we got the deal done, and it worked out in our favor. But it's funny how timing works out.
It really does. And, man, he hasn't looked back. John's just played amazing golf all the way through and been a number one in the world, won majors, all of that. So I know you're proud. I mean, not very many college coaches get to coach a world number one, and that's so a future world number one, and you were able to do that. Pretty amazing.
That is true. And there's certain guys that you do coach and you're like, oh, he's going to be pretty good. I think he's going to make it. And then there's other guys you're like, okay, this guy is really good. There's no doubt that he's going to succeed. And that was sort of the way we felt with John, especially once he had gotten to about his junior year. We knew he was good, and John and I had sat down once and had a conversation, and the conversation basically was, John, when I feel like you're truly ready to turn professional, I will give you my blessing in case you want to leave school and turn pro. Not that my blessing means anything, but I want you to know, I'll be in your corner on that. And John goes out to the Phoenix Open and finishes, I think it was 5th. And the rest of us and the team were in Hawaii. John was going to fly out, and he calls me that Sunday night and says, Coach, you remember when you used to have that conversation, or when you had that conversation about me being ready to turn pro and you'd give me your blessing? I said, yeah. I said, John, now's probably a good time for me to tell you that you've got my blessing if you want to turn pro. And he goes, Coach, just make sure you've got that flight to Hawaii for me, because you've got me for another year and a half.
Wow.
And I thought that was really cool. And I said, that's really cool. I said, what's playing into your decision? And he said, he goes, I promised my dad that if I went to the United States for college and he's, paid anything for me to go, I promised him I would get my degree. So as much as I wanted to think it was about me and wanting to stay, it was about the commitment that he had to his dad and the respect that he has for his dad. And so I thought that was pretty cool. And certainly I benefited from it. I think John benefited from that decision. And certainly Arizona State benefited from his decision to stay a 4th year as well.
Well, and it wasn't unprecedented. Your older brother had done it after winning the Tucson, and I believe what would have been his junior year. He stayed over a year and came back and got a degree, which I know in today's world, it's silly to think that could even be a reality. But I remember telling somebody in 1991 when he said, no, I'm not turning pro, it was, and what they posted the amount of money Phil gave up. And, then they've done that several years when guys were amateurs, but Scott Verplank came back and played at Oklahoma State his senior year. So it's not unprecedented. It may be getting harder for it to happen nowadays with the ridiculous money that's out there, possibly. But
yes,
let's transition over to Phil, because you caddied for him for right at 7 years. But before we talk about it, you saw him hit 100,000 shots probably growing up and caddying for him. But I remember 2 shots or 3 shots I'll never forget when he was 18 years of age.
Okay.
He was a senior in high school, and the AJGA Tour didn't have as many tournaments in those days. And they had a tournament in Abilene, Texas called the Leggett Junior. And I was a high school golf coach in Edmond, Oklahoma, and was taking three of my players to Abilene over spring break to play in that tournament. Well, I knew Phil was going to be there, and he was the AJGA Player of the Year already. And, I thought, I want to see this guy. I want to see what looks so special about him. So the ninth hole and the 18th hole at Fairway Oaks in Abilene are both par fives. Neither one of them
Okay.
particularly difficult. 9, the wind would have been down and off the left, and 18, it would have been in and off the left from the way the two holes are positioned. And he hit a bad tee shot on 9 that kind of caught a tree and kicked way back, probably 40 yards. But he was in the middle of the fairway, had a good lie. It was straight down, down and off the left. And he takes a driver. I don't know what driver it would have been in 1988, but it wasn't one of these massive drivers we have nowadays. But he took a driver off the deck and launched this thing straight up in the air and hit on the front edge of the green and pitched through to almost the back edge, but it held the green. Thought, oh my gosh. And so I was supposed to be overwatching my players, but that was not going to happen anymore. I was going to follow this phenom his whole back nine. And so I watched him all the way through the back nine. I know my guys are wondering where I am. It's an individual tournament, so it wasn't a team event. But
Okay.
get around to 18, and 18's in and off the left. This is a 25-mile-an-hour West Texas wind. And he just threw the ball down on the tee, did not put it on a tee, but just threw it down, hit a driver right off the deck, straight into that wind, probably had 260 yards straight in, hit another driver off the deck to about 12 feet. And he made birdie on both holes, no eagle, but he made birdie on both holes. But I thought he launched that driver straight up in the air on 9, down and off the left, and held the green. And he hit 2 bullets on 18 straight into the wind and hit that green in 2. And I thought, yep, I'm pretty sure this guy gets to play pro golf if he wants to. It was like, so that was my first impression of Phil Mickelson. You got to see it front row every day of your life. What's the most memorable shot you ever saw?
So the most memorable shot, Coach, actually probably may or may not have even been on TV. It was actually Friday of the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. It would have been hole, I think it's 14, the par 5 at Spyglass. And we hit it way right into the trees. Well, he gets a drop because of an unplayable lie. It was just very muddy. Not unplayable lie, but ground under repair. It was muddy area. So I'm getting a number. This is before, PGA Tour, you can even use rangefinders. Still can't. But I'm getting a number to where his ball was. Thinking, okay, I know what it is to the pin, but I also know what the layup number is. By the time we get to where he's actually dropping, it's probably 25 to 30 yards further into the trees. And I have no idea how far it is, but certainly if we're, let's say at that point, 40 yards into the trees, there's no way we're going to go for it. Because if for anybody who knows that hole, there's a lake just short of the green. So I've got the number in my head as to what I'm going to tell him. And he goes, well, what do we have? I said, well, yeah, your layup number is going to be 180 to 195 would leave you perfect. He goes, no, to the pin. I'm thinking, oh God, I don't have this number. So I just rattle out, it's 258 pin. It's 254 to cover the bunker because it was just tucked over the right bunker. Sure enough, he pulls 3-wood out.
You threw out random numbers to one of the best golfers in the world?
Well, yeah, we were so far in the trees, Coach. There was no way he was actually thinking about going for it. I thought he would have said, oh, okay, well, yeah, so it's 180 layup, right? So he pulls out 3-wood from pine straw, and I'm thinking, gosh, what if I'm wrong with this number? I barely see a gap. There's a gap 20 yards in front of us that's probably 4 feet wide, and we got to keep it low. As long as we keep it low and in between those trees, there's nothing else. But I'm thinking, how are we going to keep it low, still carry it far enough in that heavy air, and sure enough, he hits it, and it's going right at the pin. But I'm just thinking, I don't care where it goes. I don't care if it's bunker or long, just don't be short. And this thing goes to 8 feet. And I'm thinking, amazing shot. Thank God, because that could have been very bad for me too. But that was actually one of the most impressive shots. And it was sort of after that, because this was probably my second year caddying for him. After that, I kind of realized, unless there's a stone wall in front of him, he's not really thinking about laying up. If there's any chance whatsoever, we're going to go for it. And I'm probably not going to be able to talk him out of it. So I need to make sure I have every number possible. And every single time I'm going to have a number to the pin, whether or not there's a stone wall in front of us or not.
Well, like Arnold Palmer before him, I mean, he never saw a shot he didn't think he could hit. I mean, there's just no way. And there's a legendary story Mike Holder used to tell me about Steve Loy. And I think Phil was in a fairway bunker, and it was like a little bit of a lip, but certainly had to carry some trouble, like water up there or whatever. And Steve was trying to get him a layup number, and he patted Steve on the back, said, "I got this, coach," and took a 3-wood out, just launched it right on the green. It's like, I guess that's why you and I are working for a living, because we can't hit that shot, right?
Correct. And if I remember the story, it was the last hole of the tournament. Phil's teammate was already in the clubhouse and was basically, I think, 2 ahead of him. So Phil had to make eagle to tie. The team had already sort of won the tournament. So, but coach was trying to say, hey, just hit it down the fairway, whatever. But he's like, no, I got this. Don't you worry. And I've definitely had feelings like that too out there, where there were times where he just sort of says, I got this. And one of those, we were at actually same tournament, AT&T Pebble Beach, the year he won. And we were on 10, 11, 12, 13, the uphill par 4. And he's got like 108 to the pin. And because greens are super soft, might have been like 120 or something. And greens are super soft. If it was me, I would just launch a pitching wedge, try to hope that it doesn't spin off the green. He looked at me and said, do you think it's like the little punch 6 or 7? And I'm thinking, 120 yards, bro. Your 6-iron goes like 195, 200. What? I said, I just looked at him and said, you know what, bro, just feel this one out. And he took the 6-iron, and I walked 5 feet away, and he hits a little bunt 6-iron that lands about 15 feet short and releases up to like 10 feet. And I'm thinking, that is not a shot I have in the bag. I mean, I do not have a 120-yard 6-iron.
You don't win all the majors he's won and 40 events and play all that great golf all those years without having some shots that most of your opponents don't have. It's just the way it is. Just the way it is. So those are memorable shots. Mine from back in the 80s, yours obviously from caddying and all that for him. But I think the most memorable tournament would have to be the 2021 PGA at Kiowa Island. That's just me talking, because he did something that nobody's ever done. He's the oldest person ever to win a major championship at 50 years, 11 months and 7 days. Unthinkable, honestly. When Tom Watson failed to win in 09 in the Open Championship, it was a travesty. Because he was 59. When he didn't do that, you just figured nobody over 50 is going to win now. It's just not going to happen. And, there have been the oldest at the time was Julius Boros, 1968 PGA. He had won. And Phil won at over 50. Talk about that week. And was there anything leading up to that week that made you think he was going to win?
The only thing I would say that led up to that week where it wasn't specifically for that week, but he just kept saying, he's like, I know I'm going to win soon because I'm playing too well. And we were playing well, but making 1 or 2 bad swings, and all of a sudden we're missing the cut. But, in a couple of weeks before that, and I remember we were I think it was Mother's Day, and he even commented it that day in my parents' backyard that, I am going to win soon because I'm just playing too well not to win. And I said, yeah, I mean, he's playing some of the best golf of his life that I've seen in my, at that point, let's say 4 years of caddying. But there was nothing specific except for there was just this calm about him the entire week. And so we had one little thing that we decided that the entire week, no matter what happened, we were always going to focus on. And that was just staying in the present and letting our mind wander in between shots. And so if I caught him, talking about the next shot or what we have to shoot or a bogey we had just made, I would remind him, get back in the present, just, look at the trees or look at the clouds or something like that to take his focus away from either the past or the future. And so we just said, hey, we're going to stay in the present, and we're only going to worry about the next shot, but we're not going to worry about it until we get to our ball. So we're not going to focus on anything. We're not going to waste any energy. And for whatever reason that week, coach, it just really worked. There was a complete calm about him. We didn't have to have those unnecessary conversations about the bogey he just made or how we're going to make up for it. And we got to birdie this par 5. It was just one shot at a time. Let's just focus on what we got to do. And it just sort of carried through the entire week, even when we hit it in the water with driver on the, gosh, I'm going to forget what hole it is because my memory's not that good, but like the 13th hole, we drove it in the water, and, that could have turned into a big number, but we said, okay, how do we make 5 from here? And we just do that and just kept plugging along. And luckily things worked out in our favor. We were able to obviously enjoy the moment. It was certainly stressful coming down the stretch, but having the 2-shot lead on that 18th green was certainly, it was enjoyable to be able to sort of sit back and look, and what a crazy, like, pandemonium type moment where, thousands of people are in the fairway and we got to try to walk our way through it just to get to the green. And then you turn around and there's just people all around you. It was cool, but it was also weird at the moment because it was just after, the pandemic.
Yeah. I look back on that, and that's one of the watershed moments. I'm a golf historian. I love the history of the game. And I think Phil's win there probably always kind of stand up there, just because you're not supposed to win at 50, almost 51. You're just not supposed to win a major. There's too much. The putting stroke has a hard enough time with all those pressure putts that he's had. And by the way, most people underestimate that.
Yeah.
He's been a great putter during his career, but because he's such a great player, he's had more pressure putts than just about anybody of his generation, other than maybe Tiger. He's had more pressure putts. And so you're tested more often, and your nerves are tested more often. You've got to be pretty amazing to overcome that. How was he able to overcome those nerves? Basically what you just described, what you and him were going through?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think it goes back to your practice and your routine, and you keep reminding yourself, like, it sounds cliche, but as coaches, you always say, this is why we practice. You're going to make, 100 4-footers or 3-footers in a row. So then when you get put in that moment, you're making it seem like it's just, putt number 101. And so you try to get yourself to believe that the practice has paid off, or it is going to pay off. And that's pretty much the same thing. It's this is why you go out and practice 2 hours a day on putting within 6 feet, so that when you're in that moment, you've got the self-belief that you're going to be able to make it. And I think it's something that most coaches sort of teach. And I think that when you're put in that moment, if you believed in the practice you put in, you do have that extra confidence when you're put in that stressful situation.
I agree with that. You've been both a coach and a caddy. You think one helped the other?
So I think being a coach probably would have helped more if when I caddied, it was not my brother, right? Because I had already known him for so long, and he's also older than me. I think if I was ever to have caddied for somebody younger, I think I could have used some of my coaching skills, more so on a younger player who also wasn't a top 5 or top 10 player of all time, right? How do you, if I only played 1 year as professional golf, how do I go tell the best player in the world what to do? Or I'm sorry, not the best player, one of the best players in the world, what to do on the golf course or how to score better. It was sort of a tough dynamic. But I would say that I learned stuff from Phil that I didn't know when I was coaching. And it's, to some degree, some of the things were embarrassing, but I didn't know that, I always felt like if you hit the fairway and your 7-iron goes 175, that your 7-iron is going to go 175. But it doesn't. If it's into the grain, it's going to go about 172 or 171. And if it's down grain, it might go a little bit further. That is not something that ever registered in my mind until I started caddying for Phil, and I realized how precise he is. He didn't want to know whether or not it was a 175 or 180 shot. He wanted to know whether it was 177 or 178. And so I had to be very precise because his knowledge of his golf ball and his swing was that precise. So I had to be as well.
I've seen some interviews with him where he's going through that process of talking through it. And he talked for about a minute and a half or 2 minutes on this one shot. And all the video I'm talking about in the interview, it's like that. He's a brilliant, brilliant golf mind. And he never got credit for it because, like Arnold Palmer before him, he lost some tournaments by hitting some shots that most people say, well, he shouldn't have done that or whatever.
Yeah.
He had an amazing golf mind. I think he still does.
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah.
he thinks he can still win. That's the crazy thing about it. I love it.
Well, that's the thing is when you said, it was unfathomable to win at 50. I said, well, don't tell him that now because he still thinks he can win a major. He's still trying to win the U.S. Open to complete the Grand Slam. But he does have a very, very good mind when it comes to golf, not just with his own game, but just the knowledge of what shafts do and anything to do with club making and lie angles and bounce and things like that. He is very knowledgeable. He is like a little golf savant when it comes to that sort of stuff. I don't think his background with the history of the game is as good as some people's, like John Rahm. John knows like every shot of every player in every major, it seems like, but he definitely knows how to, create spin with the golf ball and what this does and what that does. And
You know, he also knows how to create history. So he doesn't have to know about it. He's creating it, right?
that is true too. And you did mention like um, that the fact that certain shots that he's tried to hit may have cost him some tournaments. Bones used to say, because Bones obviously caddied for him longer than I did. Bones would say, yeah, some shots have cost him tournaments, but that mentality has also helped him win some tournaments. So you win some, you lose some, based on the aggressive nature of his game. But all in all, I think he will look back and say his career was very complete. Obviously, missing the U.S. Open has been a disappointment, but don't tell me he can't win it because he's still going to be trying the next few years.
He might. Next time you talk to him, ask him about the Leggett Junior at Abilene, Texas, his senior year in high school, and just tell him that a high school golf coach was absolutely jaw dropped. I couldn't believe it that a guy could do what he did with a driver off the fairway twice. Just
I will certainly do that, and he's still trying to hit plenty of DODs. He's definitely hitting plenty of driver off the deck still.
oh, he still works like a kid too. He works
Yeah.
hard. Um, so what do you miss most about caddying for Phil? I know you're into a great part of life of being a dad and
hmm
obviously raising kids, but what do you miss about that 7 year stretch?
So certainly the adrenaline rush when you're caddying, and your player has a chance to win. There's a nice adrenaline rush because it's you want to make sure you're doing everything you can to help your player finish it off to get the W. And so the adrenaline rush. And when I was single, I loved the travel. I loved the travel because you could go to places you've never seen before. If there was an off week, maybe you'd go on a little vacation. So those are kind of, and then the camaraderie amongst the other players and caddies. Um, but I really would not trade that for what I have right now, which I found the love of my life, my wife. We've had two kids. I've got a 3.5-year-old and a 9-month-old, and I knew that there was going to come a time when I was caddying that my oldest kid was going to start crying because he knew what it meant when I was getting the luggage out, or he knew it meant I was going to be gone for a couple weeks. And I knew that once I got to that moment, it was sort of going to be time to make a hard decision. And luckily, I'm in a position that I was able to do so. So I'm now retired, and I'm just a stay-at-home dad taking care of the two kids, and I absolutely love it.
Well, stay-at-home dad, some people look at that and that they've got this question mark. Is that really the thing? It's the most important job in the entire world, being a parent. There's nothing even close. And I'm not a parent, but I watch and I've coached kids who have been from great parenting and others that have not been from such good parenting. What you're doing is an extremely important job.
Absolutely. There is no bigger influence I can have than on my kids, upbringing. And the opportunity sort of is only until they're about 13 or 14 years old, because at that time, obviously they start going to high school, they start having more friends, they spend more time with their friends. And so it's those first 13 or 14 years that I really have the opportunity to teach my kid as much as I can about how I want them to grow up and the type of person I want them to be. And I have two boys, so how to be gentlemen and open doors and always say please and thank you and look people in the eyes. And I have a short window. And like you're saying, it's the most important job a person can ever have. And while financial pay, let's say, is not there, the long-term perks of watching a human develop and then become an awesome person for society and an adult, and eventually maybe become a parent as well. There's nothing else more important, and I'm very blessed to have put myself in a position where I can do that, and be around the kids every day. I get to put them to bed and wake them up every morning.
That's incredible. I applaud you for that. Is the 3.5-year-old, what is his name?
Our 3.5-year-old is named Asher, and our 9-month-old is Lennox.
Is Asher hitting a golf ball yet?
He's starting to. I'm not trying to push him into it too much yet, Coach. He likes watching golf with me, and we'll go in the backyard and we'll swing it, but he doesn't have the interest yet to grind or just hit balls on the range. So I'm gonna wait until he sort of tells me he wants to come with me, and when he does, it's going to be one of the coolest moments to be able to take him out there.
Yeah, when you take him to the golf course, if he let him drive that cart every once in a while, he'll think you're a hero.
That is true. I shouldn't be telling people this, but we let him sit in the front seat once we get inside of our community, inside the gates, and let him drive a little bit. He's going to be one heck of a good driver. Yeah, I'd be surprised, but you never know. He could be an F1 driver over a golfer.
Well, okay, but you'll be proud either way.
100%.
The thing you miss most about coaching, because you haven't done it for a little over 7 years, what's the thing or actually 9 years, what's the thing you love most about coaching? Miss most?
So I think every coach, when they get out, will miss the competition again, would miss the adrenaline rush. But what I really miss is just being around the guys and having that little bit of an influence as a big brother, making sure they're making the right decisions off the golf course, and just trying to help them become the best people they can be as well. I miss the competition. Certainly don't miss the paperwork, the compliance stuff, the fundraising. I don't miss any of that, but I do miss being around the guys on a daily basis and just sort of trying to be their big brother and make sure they make the right decisions.
I love the fact you said that Alex Ching is one of your best friends, and here he is still chasing his dream. And you obviously were a big part of that dream because you got him into college. You believed in him initially, and you guys still have a great relationship today. You probably will 30 years from now.
Absolutely. That's certainly the plan. Our 2 wives are good friends. Alex just had a baby as well. So our youngest and their child will, I'm sure, be able to hopefully hit the golf course here in a few years. And yeah, that's definitely been pretty cool. He's a good dude, and I'm feel very lucky that he's actually in my life, and very thrilled that he moved back to California here a couple of years ago.
Great. Okay. Last question I have for you today, and I do appreciate you coming on to the podcast with me. But, I asked this question to a lot of coaches. Some are former, some are current, some are, assistant coaches, whatever. But just the best piece of advice that another coach gave you. I always think that college golf coaches are pretty giving in general, and of information, which is really, really important when you're a young coach. So was there anybody that gave you something that you used throughout your career?
Wow, that's a good question. I don't remember anything specific specific that somebody told me, but I remember when I got to ASU, there was a piece of paper, way back on this little file cabinet. I was going through all the paperwork and I was getting rid of it and reading what it was and whether or not I still needed it. And there was a quote, and I think it holds true when it comes to a coach with how you coach your players. And it said, "You will not all be treated equally, but you will all be treated fairly." I started thinking about that. I'm like, well, that actually makes sense. Like, you want to treat everybody fairly, but you're not necessarily going to be able to treat your number 1 player the same as your number 9. And there's multiple reasons why. One of them simply being when you spend 4 or 5 days in a row with your number 1 player, or 2 or 3 on the road at a tournament, you're naturally going to be around them more and learn more about what's going on and how you can help them than your number 9 player who's at home just practicing. So you can treat everybody fairly, which is super important, but they're not always going to be treated equally. And if you can let the players know that early, it makes more sense for when things happen. And then I would say personally, the one piece of advice I like is, our society nowadays is so tied into our phones, social media, texting, that we're losing the ability to have difficult conversations one-on-one. And so one thing I had a rule of, which was, if it's something important, do not text me your concerns. You need to come in and see me face to face. If for some reason you and I cannot come to an agreement face to face and you need to get your parents involved, I can talk to your parents, but I'm not going to talk to your mom or dad until you have been able to man up and have the conversation with me in person first. Because once they get out of college and the real world and they're in the business world or whatever, they can't just text their way out of difficult conversations.
It's called conflict resolution, and adults that have sense about them actually have those conversations. And that's good that you did that. So,
yeah.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I really enjoyed the Phil stories. I enjoyed hearing about how your early part of your career before you got to Arizona State went in coaching. And gosh, I hope I get to see you again. I saw you at Arizona State's tournament briefly this year, but maybe I'll be out in San Diego with the Junior World or something, and I'll see you again sometime soon.
Well, Coach, thanks for having me. And I would say more importantly, I'll see you at La Costa next year for the national championship. How about that?
I would absolutely love that. That'd be great. I love going there this year, and I would love a return trip. Okay. Well, I appreciate it, Tim. Thanks again.
You got it. Thanks, Coach.